Heisenberg, he's wonderful. He and Bob Berkowitz invented something he calls the Big Six. It's a way of solving problems that involve using information of one kind or another. It isn't anything complicated. I've been using it myself. The kids call him Dr. I, the information doctor. He spent a day at our school and taught the students to be information-seeking strategists. And even the little ones are bragging about how they're going to be synthesizing and evaluating their information, throwing all those big words around like they know what they're talking about. They do. They can define their task, locate or access sources, and use that information for practically every little thing they do. I am so glad Mike came. Now I can teach them skills they will use throughout their life, no matter what technological wonders we dream up next.
Information is power. Information is power. Information is power. Let's talk about some of the dilemmas of the information age. And one is Moore's Law. Moore's Law says the computing power doubles every 18 months. Think about it. The power of computers today, in 18 months you'll get twice. Bill Gates recently said something about the growth of computers. He said that today computers are 1 million times more powerful than they were 20 years ago. But here's the kicker. It's going to happen again. In 20 years, our computers will be 1 million times more powerful than they are today. Now, think about what that means. Imagine the miniaturization and where we're going that way, and they're getting smaller and smaller. We will not have computers that we are used to having today. We won't sit down in front of a computer. The computers will be built in. When we sit down at this table and you sit down, the table will know it's you. I call that the butt print, like fingerprint. You sit down and it recognizes you. Now, of course, the answer to all of our problems is the internet, right? The internet, simple, easy to use, just what you need when you want it, in the form you want it is the internet, right? Obviously, that's not. In reality, the problem with the internet is just overwhelming to us, and there's just too much out there, and it's part of the problem, not part of the solution. USA Today noted that the number of websites doubles every 40 to 50 days. And this shows no sign of abating. I mean, think about that. If there are 500,000 websites now, there'll be 1 million websites in 40 to 50 days, and so forth and so on. That this overwhelming information environment just creates too much for us. Well, what's the solution? Where we're going with all this, and how does it happen? Well, the solution in education in most of our society has been to speed things up, right? To try to pack in more and more content. John Nesbitt had estimated that science and technology information doubles about every 5.5 years. When you think about that, that means your classes today have to deal with something like 5 times the amount of information that we did just a generation ago. If we really think that we can pack in all the content that needs to be taught, we're kidding ourselves. Because again, remember, it's doubling conservatively every 5 to 8 years, doubling the amount of information. And so we must turn to something else besides just that. And I think the alternative solution is to focus on the process as well as the content. We're going to talk about the Big Six process. It's a 6-stage process. It is not a linear process, although we lay it out that way. What we have found through our research is that if you're going to be a successful problem solver over time, that you must complete all of the stages at one point in time or another.
So you want to know what the Big Six are. There's task definition, define the problem and identify the information needed to solve that problem. Then we have information-seeking strategies during which we brainstorm all possible sources and select the best sources. Usually, that is followed by location and access. It's pretty obvious what that is. We locate those sources and find the information within each source. Next, we have use of information, during which we engage, read, hear, see the information, and extract relevant information. Then we have synthesis. We organize information from the different sources and present the result. But we aren't done until the evaluation, which is when we judge the results of our efforts in terms of effectiveness, and we judge our process to see if we were efficient with our time. That's it, the Big Six. Task definition, information-seeking strategies, location and access, use of information, synthesis, and evaluation. Oh, but not necessarily in that order. The Big Six isn't a linear process. In other words, you don't have to go through each stage in order. It's more of a framework that describes what it takes to solve an information problem. I was teaching some of these skills before Mike came and just calling them other names. But people need to go through each stage to be good problem solvers, and the Big Six teaches all the components in relationship to each other. Now let's take a look at the Big Six in action.
Task definition has two parts to it. It means defining the problem and identifying the information needed. Task definition, define the problem. Football, what's my problem? I got to beat the other team, right? What do we have to do here? If I'm a new student coming into your class, right, and I want to know, how can I do a really good job on this, but without wasting a lot of time or whatever, tell me the essence. How can I be assured? What do I have to make sure that I do on this assignment if I want to get a good grade?
You could look in the dictionary.
I could look in the dictionary for information about the states, but how am I going to find out what I'm supposed to do?
You could look in an almanac and get facts.
Well, you keep giving me facts about the states and all that stuff, but I think what I need to do is what?
Ask the teacher.
I think we need to ask the teacher. How much information do I need? Do we need a lot? Do we need a little? You know, what's just right? It says task definition. Can you say that with me?
Task definition.
Terrific. Task definition means what is my job? What do I have to do? And if you read what's next to it, it says what needs to be done. So what needs to be done in this situation? What are we trying to decide? You know what the problem is? I have a niece. Her name is Amy. And Amy has a birthday coming up in about 3 weeks. And we need to get Amy a birthday present. Now, Amy's going to be 8 years old. You know anybody who's 8? Whoa, okay, so you're all around that, huh? Okay, so the problem is, the question is, what do I get Amy? Now, also part of task definition, we try to figure out what it is we need to know. So in order to decide what birthday present I should get Amy, what kinds of things would we like to know? What kinds of things? Yes?
What she likes.
We really like to know what Amy likes, right? So I'm going to write down here, Amy likes. I'll put a question mark. So we need to know that. That's one thing we'd like to know. What else would we like to know? What else do we need to know?
What does she want?
What does she want? Okay? And that's part of it. What does Amy want? All right? That's all the stuff about Amy. Not sure? Okay, what else? Sir?
What does she need?
What does she need? That's good too. Okay, so that's what we need to find out about Amy, all that stuff. What other things might we want to know in order to solve this problem? I'll give you one. All right, let's try.
How much it costs?
Yeah, how much? We want to know about various things, right? And how much they cost, right?
Yeah.
Right? So we have two things we need to know so far, right? One is things about Amy, and two is things about things that I could buy, right? There's another thing, by the way. The third thing is how much do I want to spend? Now, I like Amy a lot, but she's not my daughter, you know. So where I might buy something, a lot of money for Laura, who's my daughter, Amy, I don't want to go broke over her, right? So I have to decide that. So the example that I'd like to take us through, the student's name is Leon. And Leon's got to do a recycling project. And what they're supposed to do is to do a short paper and an oral report on the problems and solutions regarding the recycling of one type of waste. So the students have to select a type of waste and then talk about the problems that relate to that waste and then the solutions for that. But Leon has decided to do something on the recycling of tires. Sounded like a good idea, and he saw the list. He says, yeah, I like cars, and let me do that. Okay. So then let's switch to 1.2, which is what are the information requirements of the problem? In other words, what types of information does Leon need in order to do a good job on this? What do you think? What types of? I'll give you one type. Leon needs some information, some numerical information about how big of a problem is this? How many tires are there in the world? So he needs some things about processes and what happens to tires. So he needs some text. So he needs some facts and those kinds of things. Does he need just text information? Does he need graphic information? Remember the project? Project said, I believe, that he has to do an oral presentation on a short paper. Probably in an oral presentation, most of the time, we do some kind of visual and whatever, and it turns out, actually, they're supposed to use one form of a visual. So some visualizations would be nice as well. Last question, and we'll move on. How much information do you think Leon needs? Does he need 32 sources and 5 primary things and a pickup truck load worth of stuff? I'm seeing no's, right? Short paper. So will one source be sufficient?
No, 3 to 5.
3 to 5, right? Need about 3 to 5 sources. Need some numerical, some graphic, some text, and that kind of stuff, okay? The key is here, we focused on the types of information that Leon needs, okay? We've defined the problem and focused on the types, and that's the key to task definition in this case.
Sometimes I get so busy telling the students what they need to do when I could be asking them instead. And of course I could ask them how they plan to find the information they need to finish their task. And that would take us right into step 2 of the Big Six, information seeking strategies.
Information seeking strategies. Do you know what that means? What does information mean? Now I know you're gathering a lot of information under part 2 of the Big Six, which is information seeking strategies. Information seeking strategies is a fun part of the process because we brainstorm and narrow. Under information seeking strategies, let's talk about all the places we could find out some of that information. Where are we going to get that information from? Do you have a plan for your search yet? Do you have a plan for your search? You know the source you're going to check first, second, third? How am I going to find out what Amy likes, wants, and needs? How am I going to find out how much things cost? And how am I going to find out how much money that I want to spend? Why do you think that's a good source? Why would that be a good source to use? If you get them to brainstorm the sources and tell you why, and then narrow down why those are good sources, I guarantee you that they will invent all the criteria that professionals come up with for reliability, accuracy, ease of use, availability, and there's also a little fun in there. Okay? Well, the last one is easy, right? The information-seeking strategy for finding out how much money I want to spend is me. I just got to think about that, right? I have to think about how much money I want to spend. Let's say $20, around that. How's that? Yeah. So we're around that. That's why I thought about that. You help me. Let's think about all the ways that I could find out what Amy likes, wants, or needs. What are some of the information sources that I could check? How could I find out what Amy wants, likes, or needs? Okay? Somebody has answered. Yes?
You could, ask your wife.
I could ask my wife, who is Amy's aunt, right? Or I could ask, who else could I ask?
Her mother.
I could ask her mother, right? So we have some choices. What would help me to guess what Amy likes? Go ahead.
You could ask these girls what they
Ooh,
like.
that's really smart. What? Talk to me some more about that.
So, they might like some things that she likes.
Because what you're saying is I can find out what 8-year-old girls like.
You could get her the Titanic.
You see what you're doing again is you're jumping to try to solve my problem without going through the process. So we'll see what I get her, okay? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to all think for a minute. I'm going to give you 3 choices of what we could do to find out what Amy likes and needs. Wait, no hands, no hands. Here are the 3 choices. Choice number 1. Choice number 1 is to ask Amy, okay? I could do that. Choice number 2 is to ask Amy's mom, okay? Choice number 3 is to, I'll just say, observe or watch Amy, okay? I'm going to make 4 choices. Watch Amy, look at her stuff. I'll say look at her room, okay? And the 4th one is to read 8-year-old magazines, okay? Do you understand the 4 choices? Yeah. All right. Now, what's my job? What am I trying to do? What am I trying to do? Everybody tell me. Go ahead.
Finding a friend
Right, and I want to find out what Amy likes. That's the job right here. So which of the four choices? Asking Amy's mom, watching Amy, or reading a magazine. I want each of you to think which one you want, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and then we're going to see which ones you choose, okay? You all ready to choose?
Yeah.
All right. Close your eyes for 1 second and think. What would I do first? Which do I think is the best one? Why? Somebody that has an answer. Go ahead. Why would I ask Amy's mom? Why would that be a good idea? You know, why would it be a good idea?
Because she knows a lot about her,
Mhm.
and also it would make it not a surprise for the mom.
Well, who
but
cares? It would still be a surprise for Amy, and her mom knows a lot about her. So that's what we call good information, right?
Yeah.
It's a good source. It's a reliable source. That's a good source. So that's pretty good, okay? All right, let's brainstorm all possible sources now. What are some of the places that Leon could check for information about this tire recycling problem?
EPA.
He could get in contact with the EPA, because the EPA might have information on that, okay? What else? And why? I want to know why do you think that's a good source. So choose a source or two and why. So what are some of the places that you check and why? So we had the EPA. What else?
We had state laws. I had fourth graders yesterday who had learned 22 states have recycling laws. So
Oh.
we would need to know what the law was.
So you need to find out the law. And where would you find that out?
Well, we found it on the internet under the keyword state laws.
Right. And what was the source? Did you wind up at a state site?
Yes, we did.
So it was information from the state. It's a government document, a
ABC
formal.
order each state, and we just
Mhm.
skimmed down through and tried to find one that fourth graders could understand the
Wow.
terminology. We
Okay.
found a couple.
Okay. So you've just done information seeking strategies and location and access because you use the internet. And that's fine. This stuff often feeds together and loops back. So whatever. Now, why is that a good source for you?
Well, in the primary setting of my media center, I did not have state laws
Mhm.
from the entire
So
union. So
access
that
and
was always-
availability through the internet. Why was that? And that was an important source because it's factual and accurate and really good, solid information. So it's reliable, accurate information, and it was available to you. Great. What else? What are some of the other sources?
We also looked at the websites on the internet, but
Mhm.
we looked more at some of the websites of the rubber industry and so forth. What are they doing
Mhm.
with recycling?
So you're going to look at it from the corporate side and the rubber industry, but you also like the internet as a source. It's right there, right? It's easy to find. It's available, all right? Is the information any good in there? Okay? So it's pretty good information, and it's right there. So that's a decent source. Brainstorming and narrowing, that's really critical thinking. Now you have a plan. Now you're being a strategist, a strategist, a strategist.
I'm not sure I ever considered that tracking down the source material was actually part of the information solving process before. But that can be just as much of an effort as anything, and it certainly has to be done. That is step 3 of the Big 6, location and access.
Location and access is number 3. Where am I going to get that stuff? Where do I get the video from? For is the other team going to give me the video?
Previous games they played.
Location and access is finding the information and then finding the information within the sources. Big 6 step number 3, which is called location and access, means where can I find these resources? It may seem a little silly, but where can I find Amy if I need her? How do I get to Amy? How do I get to
Go to her house.
I can go to her house? What else can I do? What else can I do?
Go to a friend's house.
Well, if she's there, right? Because I'm trying to find, I'll go to her friend's house. What else?
You can ask her mother if you can go pick her up.
I could pick her up at school. Well, you know what? Yeah, go ahead. I could call her. Thank you. I was waiting for that one. Because it turns out that Amy lives 150 miles away from where I live. So I'm going to call her. What about Amy's mom? The same thing, right?
Yeah.
I would probably call her. So that's how I do that. How about if I wanted to watch Amy? I'd have to go visit, right?
Yeah.
Unless I hooked up a video camera in her room and was able to. I don't think I can do that. Okay. And what about reading the magazines? Where would I locate and access those?
Everywhere.
Where? Where's everywhere? Where do we find magazines?
Like at grocery.
Grocery stores, at stores. Where else? Go ahead.
At the library. At the library. At the library.
At the library, right. Very good. In fact, the library has more stuff in it than any place, right? and you're teaching kids the concept of keyword searching and looking by subjects. And it's really the concept of index that we want to get across, that, there's an index. And sometimes with my classes, when I'm working with them, I ask them just to say the word index. So do that with me. Say index.
Index.
Say index.
Index.
Say index.
Index.
We want the students to understand to look for indexes. Now, we can do it through telephone, right? That's another way to access. If it's that in person, you would visit and then interview and whatever. But it's somehow searching and indexes is what we want to get across these days.
Once students know how to find the information, it's important that they spend time with it, taking notes and figuring out what they want to use.
Number 4 is use of information.
Use of information. Use of information.
Now what? How do we use that? How do we put it all together? You study it. That's what the coaches do, right? And then you use the information. That means that you read from the source and you take notes and things like that. A better extraction method is a Xerox and highlight method. You're going to summarize and paraphrase, but you're still going to note the source. Even if it's your own words, you're going to know where you got the information from, okay? Start having kids cite everything all the time. If they have questions to do at the end of a chapter, let them cite the answers at the end of each question. They use the chapter, page 17. They got the answer from mom, and they put the date down. They used their friend. They knew it, right? That way, if they get it wrong, you can begin to see why they got it wrong. Were they, we say, are they on the right page? If you are going to use a direct quote, put it in direct quotes. If you found something really great from an article or something, you say, this came from the New York Times Magazine, and I quote, and you quote it, and you can say that, that's all right. Let's say that I decided to, for now, just for sake of argument here, that I called Amy's mom, okay? I talked to her on the phone. I said, hi, Sue, this is Uncle Mike, and I need to find out the kind of things that Amy likes and things like that. And she's going to tell me those things, right? And she starts to say, oh, Amy likes lots of things, Uncle Mike. She likes CDs, and she likes this group and whatever, and she loves clothes, and she starts going on and on. How am I going to remember that stuff? How am I going to keep track of all those things? Who hasn't answered in a while? Well, you guys are really actually pretty good. Yes?
You can write them down.
I can write them down. And that's Big Six step number 4. That's called use of information. See that? Number 4, what can I use from these resources? So in this case, if the students visit the local recycling center, let's talk about use of information. What might they have to do? How would they engage and extract?
They record their findings by interviewing the business
Absolutely.
owner and the operator.
So they might use a cassette recorder. They might videotape it, right? Those are extraction methods, the ways of taking the information with us. And kids really like that, okay? How about if they're using a website? How are they going to get that information?
We used copy and paste.
Copy and paste, right. So we teach them that skill. And one of the interesting things these days is teaching them how to copy and paste and then to paste that right into their projects, their reports, their synthesis, and still to note the proper of where it came from and all those kinds of things. And one of the ways to do that, to ensure that, is that it's not acceptable for them to turn anything in that's not cited. If you don't put in where you got the information from, you're dead. Okay? You can't get a top grade.
The synthesis part, I think, is the most complicated, but Mike had all kinds of techniques to help make it understandable. And he has exercises and handouts that give tips on ways of organizing.
Number 5 is synthesis. Synthesis, they take all that stuff, they organize it, and we make a game plan. Step number 5 is where we've got the information, and we organize it, and we put it together. We organize, and we present. Now, most presentations are like a story, right? You have an introduction part, you have the body part, and you have the inclusion. You start to think a minute about if you were to organize the information that you have for your poster, how would you do it? For Leon's recycling project, let's jump back to task definition. Remind me, how is he supposed to present this? Short paper.
Oral presentation.
Oral presentation, okay?
And you said a visual.
And it's supposed to be a visual with the oral presentation. We checked that back with his teacher, and that's what he was required to do. Okay, how might he organize that? There are options for him, right? If I asked you to organize your oral presentation about recycling, how might you do it? What might you present? Imagine the structure for me. What we're going to do is an organizing exercise. All right? Here's your task. I'm going to give each table an envelope full of pictures. All right? I'll show you what's here for a minute. Okay? I'll show you on this table. Each one of you gets an envelope, and the envelope is full of all different kinds of pictures. Okay? Now, your job, each table, you're going to work as a table, all right, is to organize the pictures in some way so that it makes sense to you, all right? So you're supposed to organize the picture. Then you're going to tell us as a class, give it a title. Excuse me. I'm going to give it a title, and you have to tell me, how is it organized? Okay, we'll start with this table here. Girls, will you tell us your title? Remember I said title? Do you have a title? I hope. Okay, and how you're organized.
Our title is The Town and the Way People Live in It.
A town and the way people live in it, okay?
This is like the people that's right here, the people that live in it and the things that they enjoy. Like here's the stores, the grocery stores, things that they enjoy, like small animals and movies, and then other types of stores.
Okay. So you took a common theme, and I showed you this earlier. You took a common theme, and then you built things off of it, right?
Yeah.
And they all right. And the middle of was the town, right? Some people call this a web way to organize this first one. That's a web light. That's very interesting. Very nice. Okay, thank you. Let's go to this group over here. Okay? Go right ahead. Who's going to talk? Somebody tell us. Go ahead.
Ours is called The Way People Live.
The way people live.
We've got the machines here,
Uh-huh.
and we've got the people here,
Uh-huh.
and the animals right in there.
Ah. Okay. So what you've really done is the way people live, but you've broken it into 3 groups, right? Right? The groups are the things that people do, people, and animals. So you've organized it by what we call categories. Okay? So that's a second way, category. How many categories could you have? As many as you want. Right. Well, that's true. You can have as many as you want. But I will tell you something. This is a secret. This is an information secret, okay? Most people have trouble remembering more than 5 or 7 things. If you have 15 categories, people aren't going to remember it very well. So if I were to organize something around categories, I would have 3 or 5. 5 is a really good number of categories. Okay, let's switch to this table here. Would you tell us how you organized it? Go ahead.
The title is Your Lifeline. It's about this person who we go through their life. First, they wake up, like the morning they come to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And then they really love computers, animals. They get ready, they eat breakfast, they get dressed, they go to work, they're at work, they work on their job. She loves the computer, gets her eyes checked, gets a bonus, goes to California, meets her relatives, quits playing computers, picks up tennis. 5 years later, she's skinny, and she starts hating computers after tennis, and then she gets married. She moves into a nice fancy house. She gets divorced. She marries again. 6 years later, she likes to watch sumo wrestling, and then this guy gets her interested in computers again, and her life ends.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty impressive. So one of the ways, the way you organized it to an extent was as a story, right?
Yeah. Yes.
It was a story. You told a story from the beginning to end. And you know, you're going to have that choice even with your posters. With your state, when you lay it out, you could do it by this kind of a web. You could have the state and things off it. You could do it by different categories about the state, or you could tell a story by the state. The other thing that you did with the story is you did it what we call by time, right? It's kind of like a chronology, like a timeline, right? By time. And that's very creative that we've done that. So we have 3 great ways of organizing it so far. Number 5 says, what can I make to finish the job? It's called, here what we mean by make is I have to make a decision. So what I have to do is look at these things and make my choice. Now let's take a look at some of these things. Let's just decide whether these things cost a lot or a little. Okay? So you tell me now. I'll use a different color. I love these colors. This is great, Mrs. Nunn. Okay. Clothes, a lot or a little?
A lot.
A lot? I'll tell you what. There's 3 levels. A lot, a little, or middle.
Middle.
Yeah, I think that's middle. Okay? I mean, can I get clothes for $20, $25? Yeah, sounds like you're not sure. What about CDs? A lot? Actually not. I can probably get a CD for about $15, right? That's in the middle. Okay, so that's middle. Now, I want you to tell me, what did you come up with some really good toys to get?
Titanic. All 3 of us got Titanic.
You like Titanic? What is Titanic? What?
It's a movie.
Oh, it's the movie. So you think the movie. But we didn't have movie on. So that's something we should have gone back and thought about. So you really like that. How many in the group really like the idea of getting Titanic? Well, I got a pretty good group on that. Okay, next. I just have time for a couple more. Yes, sir.
PlayStation.
A PlayStation. Wait, how much does a PlayStation cost?
$200.
So how much did we say we were going to spend? I don't think I can get Amy a PlayStation, but if she has a PlayStation, I might be able to get her a game, okay?
Yeah.
Sir, what do you think? Nintendo, I think that's the same problem. If you think about it, we are spending billions of dollars every year on software in our society to help us to organize and present. We've got word processing, desktop publishing, presentation software, all of these computer-type programs that help us to do a better job in presenting. So it must be pretty important. This video itself is a presentation of information.
One thing I didn't realize is important to do is to look at the whole kit and caboodle when it's done and see if there were ways it could have been done better.
And the last thing is evaluation, judging the result as well as judging the process. Judge the process. Of all the things that you did for this bulletin board assignment, of all the things you had to do, what was the most difficult? Where did you have the most difficulty? And judging is where we judge the result, which is the effectiveness of the process as well as the efficiency of it. So in addition to using the stuff, I want you to be able to come back and say, you know, Mr. Eisenberg, this source was really, really good, or this one was terrible. You told me to go to the encyclopedia. That didn't work at all, or whatever, okay? In business, in the workplace, how do you know if you're successful? Well, you get a good job, and you said it before, right? You make a lot of money, right? Should kids be able to evaluate their own work? I would say that almost on any assignment, we need students to be able to evaluate whether or not they've done a good job. If a student turns in a paper and thinks they got a B on it, and it turns out that they get a C minus, we've got a problem. Because there's a gap between the teacher's expectations and the student, and we need to bring that together. What I always like and suggest is that students should either grade themselves and write a little short thing about how they think they did, right, and how they could improve themselves, or we allow them to audio tape that. Give them a little cassette recorder and they talk about it. I'm talking about for the big assignments, so that we can compare how they've done with how they think they've done and try to bridge that gap. Now, we're almost done, right? We got one more stage to go, and that's number 6, which is evaluation. How will I know if I did a good job in this? How will I know that I did a good job in buying and getting a birthday and picking out a birthday gift for Amy?
You could give it to her on her birthday.
And then what? How will I know?
By the way she acts.
By the way she acts, right? Is it enough if she says, "Oh, thanks, Uncle Mike"? No. What do I really want to see? Right, smile, a big hug. If I get a kiss or something like that, and she goes, "Oh, wow, I never even thought of that. That's great." Right? If she says, "Oh, I already have that. Did I do a good job?" No. So that's what I have to find out. When you're done with all this, when you're done ready to turn in your assignments, you really should be able to say, "Hey, I think I did pretty well on this. This is going to get me a B or an A or whatever." It's up to you to really be able to decide that. Judging the result as well as judging the process.
That Big Six program sure is outstanding. In a school in New York, they were having troubles with students not passing on the state regents exam. Back in '97, only 53% of the students were passing. But Bob Berkowitz and the Big Six came to the rescue. Now more than 90% of those students are passing. The Big Six staff are working night and day to make materials and teaching techniques more accessible to you. You can find lots of tips in the Big Six newsletter, like translating the Big Six into the Super 3 for young kids, Plan, Do, and Review. You'll find that in the back issue, Volume 1, Number 1. They also make presentations at conferences and do workshops, and they have a website, of course, at www.big6.com.
To be information literate, a person must be able to recognize when information is needed and have the ability to locate, evaluate, and use effectively the needed information. This is a definition of information literacy from the American Library Association. And the quote I have here is from the U.S. Department of Labor's SCANS report, the Secretary's Commission on Achieving Necessary Skills. And it says that the competencies for all entry-level employees, people who are just working into any job situation, involves acquiring and using information and working with a variety of technologies. I just want to remind you that the Big Six is not just for the top students or the bottom students. It's for everyone in our society.